She married from London all the way to Canada, but the moment she stepped off the train, she regretted it. The farm and prairie her husband had described were all lies. What waited for her was a cold, empty place in the middle of nowhere. Even worse, not a single person in this family welcomed her. Not only that, even her clothes were considered far too flashy by her mother-in-law. Her mother-in-law directly took out rough old farm clothes and told her to change into them right away. Outside, the wind was freezing and biting. Even going to the bathroom was extremely inconvenient. How could a woman who had grown up in a big city ever have suffered through such a crude outhouse? In fact, just 1 year earlier, Lily was still a young girl in the prime of her life. Every day, she and her group of girlfriends went back and forth to dance halls, hoping to land a wealthy husband there. But on this day, it seemed Cupid had really heard her prayers. Several handsome soldiers instantly caught the girl's attention, and since the men took the initiative to say hello, how could the girls not feel their hearts flutter? Yet in the crowd, there was one honest-looking boy staring straight at Lily. He stared until the girl became shy. The other soldiers had already left, but the boy's gaze still looked as if he were waiting forever. The girlfriend beside Lily quickly understood what was going on. Clearly, he had fallen for the shy Lily. Then the boy gestured from across the room, seeming to hint that the girl should dance with him. So, encouraged by her friends, Lily stopped hesitating. For the first time, she tried getting close to a boy, and from the way they looked at each other, it seemed both of them had already begun to like one another. When the music ended, the boy pulled Lily over to the bar. It turned out his name was Charlie, and he came from Alberta, Canada. Judging by his appearance, he seemed like an honest man, but in reality, he had only just met the girl and was already unable to hold himself back. How could Lily possibly handle someone this forward? So she quickly avoided Charlie's enthusiastic advances, but the boy explained that he was about to go to the front line. Whether he would live or die tomorrow was still unknown. If that was the case, why not cherish the present while they still could?
Cheat you have.
The boy felt a little embarrassed, so he quickly changed the subject and talked about their family lives. It turned out Charlie's father had died long ago. Only his mother and younger sister lived at home now, and Lily's past was even more heartbreaking. She had been an orphan since childhood and had grown up in a relief home in London. Her family was a group of girlfriends who, like her, had no parents. At the same time, her good friend Sophie seemed to have found someone she liked at the dance too. The two danced close together and were having the time of their lives. Soon, midnight arrived. People gathered together and chatted. Sophie's newly met boyfriend frankly said he owned an estate in Canada and was absolutely the son of a wealthy family. This surprised Sophie. She had actually landed a rich catch. When the awkward Charlie described his own family background, he lied and said his family owned a vast prairie. So everyone began guessing each other's family property. Then Charlie continued with a straight face, saying there was also a huge ranch on that prairie, but this made all the girls laugh. Clearly, the boy was joking around with humor, but when the air raid siren sounded overhead, everyone fell silent again, because the brutal war had changed everything. By the next morning, the girls had thrown themselves back into intense work. They worked at a clothing company, and every one of them was an excellent seamstress, especially Lily, whose hands were remarkably skillful. Of course, her dates with Charlie were also going smoothly. They even went into an underground air raid shelter in London just to find a quiet place. Then, with no one around, the two young people naturally found it hard to control themselves. But just as things were about to go further, a large crowd of refugees hiding from the bombing suddenly poured in. This left the two of them more than a little embarrassed, so they quickly came back to their senses. Before long, Lily put on a wedding dress. Calling it a wedding dress was generous, because it was actually made from an abandoned tablecloth. Even though it was so cheap, on the 19-year-old bride, it still looked beautiful and moving. Besides, she had prepared a surprise for Charlie, and just like that, before Charlie went off to fight, Lily held a simple wedding with him. After knowing each other for only a few days, the two became a flash married couple, and this night was destined to be anything but ordinary. But when Charlie tried to remove his wife's wedding dress, Lily showed obvious pain. It turned out the girl's back was covered in scars. Heartbroken, Charlie asked who had done this to her. He promised that he would take care of her forever. 3 months later, Charlie and his comrades began heading to the battlefield. This kind of parting made it impossible to know whether they would live or die in the future. Similarly, Sophie and her boyfriend were reluctant to park beside them. Just then, Lily told Charlie a piece of news. She was carrying a baby. Before the boy could show any happiness, his comrades quickly called him away. Perhaps in his eyes, this child should not have come into the world, because the war had taken away his right to truly be a father. Time quickly moved ahead 6 months. With the help of 2 midwives, Lily gave birth to a healthy baby girl. She named her daughter Lindy. During this time, after Charlie received his wife's letter, he returned once with the wounded men heading home. The moment her husband appeared, all of Lily's waiting became worth it, but the army gave Charlie only 3 days of leave. Even so, it was enough for them to rejoice over the birth of their daughter. The painful days still had to be faced. They parted again at the same place as before. No one knew whether the two would ever have the chance to meet again in this life. As time passed, 2 years went by in the blink of an eye. Today was an especially special day, because Lily and her best friend each received letters from the front. At first, Lily thought her husband had died, but it turned out to be a letter from the Royal Canadian Army Office. The letter required all soldiers' families to relocate to Canada. The 2 women were visibly excited, because their husbands had not died, and besides, they were about to go to their respective mothers-in-law's homes, which naturally made them extremely excited. So the 2 sisters, responding to the family resettlement call, boarded a ship bound for Canada. After several dull weeks at sea, they arrived in this strange land. The station was lively, yet strangely bleak. It was far from what they had imagined. The moment Sophie got off the train, she regretted it. She admitted that she should never have come to this place in the middle of nowhere, but when several elegant ladies in the distance called her name, the girl's attitude changed instantly. Sophie felt this sudden surprise, and her boyfriend's family dressed her in fashionable fur right on the spot. This made Lily deeply envious. It turned out Sophie's boyfriend really had not lied to her. His wealth was right there for everyone to see. Then the 2 sisters could only say goodbye sadly, because Lily still had to go find her own family, and it was from this moment that their fates began to change. Next, Lily continued onto another train, heading to an even more remote place, but she never could have imagined that a nightmare-like life was waiting for her. The woman had traveled thousands of miles to join her mother-in-law, yet her mother-in-law looked at her with suspicion and judgment. Perhaps it was because she was dressed too glamorously and looked completely out of place in country life. Even when she asked her daughter to greet her grandmother, the woman remained expressionless and said nothing. Even her sister-in-law Sylvia wore a look of disgust. The scene instantly became awkward. Finally, the old woman spoke and told them to follow. With this attitude toward a daughter-in-law, most people would probably have turned around and left, but Lily still chose to greet them with a smile. After all, life here was completely different from the habits of a big city. No matter how wronged she felt, she had to swallow it. So Lily could only follow her mother-in-law's jeep to this poor, remote countryside. Along the way, Lily turned into a chatterbox, trying to get closer to her husband's family, but no matter what she said, she could not move the 2 of them. What her mother-in-law cared about more was her son's military allowance. It was honestly heartbreaking. Fortunately, Lily had a good enough attitude and did not fall out with her mother-in-law because of it. But this countryside was completely different from what she had imagined. How had the farm and vast prairie her husband described turned into this barren wilderness? In reality, Lily had been swept away by love back then, and it seemed her husband had lied to her. When she saw the few simple wooden houses ahead, the excitement in the woman's heart instantly cooled by half. How could Lily, who had grown up in London, adapt to living in a broken-down place like this? And from the way her sister-in-law got out of the car, it seemed one of her legs was not very mobile. She clearly could not fully take care of herself. The poor girl could only accept her fate. Then Lily carried her luggage into the house, and from beginning to end, her mother-in-law never once looked properly at her daughter-in-law. It was understandable that 2 people who had just met might feel reserved, but not even holding her own granddaughter was a bit hard to justify. Still, Lily could endure all of this, even when her mother-in-law told her to change into the foul-smelling farm clothes. As a woman trying to adapt to local customs, she had no choice but to accept it helplessly. Even the crude outhouse she had never used before was so cold that her backside almost froze. No matter how bitter and wronged she felt, she could only swallow it silently. Who told her to fall in love with a countryman back then? In truth, her mother-in-law's life was not easy either. Ever since the war began, her son had not come home, and she did not know whether he was alive or dead. Her husband had died of illness many years earlier. She had been a widow for almost 10 years. Thinking of this, the old woman clutched her chest in pain. It was as if her experience and her daughter-in-law's were somewhat similar. The next morning arrived. While her mother-in-law prepared breakfast, she told Lily to go collect eggs from the chicken coop. Although Lily was a city woman, she could not just eat at home without doing any work, so she had no choice but to obey. But how could she have ever experienced such things? Even picking up eggs terrified her.
See? Oh, God, you beat me! You go get out of it! Get out!
Fortunately, after relentless effort, Lily finally completed this seemingly difficult task, and at the breakfast table that followed, she made another joke of herself. Lily wanted to go to a nearby town to buy some daily necessities, or maybe watch a movie, but she had seriously overestimated this empty, remote land. Her sister-in-law directly told her that the nearest town was still 60 miles away, and it would cost 40 cents to get there. That was several days of living expenses for them, so she had better give up that idea as soon as possible. Her sister-in-law even saw her as a restless woman. The hostility in her mother-in-law's eyes was truly frightening. But no matter what, this small setback would never defeat a strong woman, so Lily began calculating her husband's allowance. But this tiny amount of savings was still far from enough to let her return to her hometown of London. At the same time, laughter and cheerful voices came from outside. Clearly, guests had come to the house, and to avoid losing face, Lily changed out of the farm clothes and into a beautiful dress. But when she proudly stepped outside to show herself, she was unexpectedly laughed at by the guest. It turned out the customer who had come to get her hair done was Peggy, a friend of Lily's husband. What should have been a friendly exchange was ruined by one sentence from her mother-in-law.
Blimey, it looks like a salon in here.
Seeing as Charlie's paycheck is still going to you, we have to make some money somehow.
Lily froze instantly. The meaning behind those words was still that they were thinking about her son's allowance. Fortunately, her daughter's appearance interrupted the awkward conversation, but this guest was no easy person either. On the surface, she praised Lily's beautiful clothes, but when Lily sincerely offered to make her a dress, she said the fabric was too sheer and unsuitable for her.
Oh, no, Lord, no, I don't think so. Why, you can see right through it in the light.
Well, you should wear autumn colours. There's a really nice one called Sienna Sunset. Look devastating on you.
Well, I like pink. It's Charlie's favorite color.
What kind of friend of her husband was this? She was obviously Charlie's ex-girlfriend. She had come this time to declare war on Lily. Even her mother-in-law and sister-in-law seemed to be hateful enough to side with her. After that, Lily returned to her room full of anger. Outside, however, the others were happily chatting. After Peggy paid for the service, she cheerfully opened the door and left. When the work was finished, Sylvia wanted to call her sister-in-law out for tea, but her mother interrupted her. Meanwhile, Lily refused to keep tolerating it. She directly laid everything out to the mother and daughter. Didn't they just want Charlie's allowance? She would give them every penny of it. The situation worsened rapidly, but it did not stop there. One day, while the woman was bathing in the living room and listening to music, a man suddenly came to the door, holding something in his arms. He barged straight in. This sudden accident instantly exposed Lily and left her deeply embarrassed. Just then, Sylvia walked down from upstairs. It seemed the boy just now had come to deliver something for her. The atmosphere became extremely awkward for a moment. The boy even kept sneaking glances. This made Sylvia instantly realize something, and jealousy flared up. After that, Lily got dressed and even greeted the boy on her own initiative. With such a charming woman standing before him, what man could avoid being moved? But what she did not know was that this man was the younger brother of the woman who had just left. He was also the person Sylvia was currently pursuing. How could the girl not be angry when her sister-in-law completely stole her spotlight? Life was full of all kinds of misfortune, but Lily was naturally optimistic. Compared with being an abandoned orphan, what could be worse than that? If the family would not accept her, then she would have fun on her own, so she happily bounced into the nearby small town that had at least a little life, hoping to find a job there and survive by her own effort. But no matter how many shops she visited, or how she asked at the auto repair station, no one was willing to take her in. In truth, from her makeup and the way she dressed, she did not look like someone who could handle hard labor. And just like that, Lily could only return home in disappointment. But unexpectedly, two more customers had come to the house. The same out-of-place expressions, the same doubtful looks. They stared at Lily as if they were looking at someone from a completely different world. Lily heard their mocking conversation, but this time, she did not talk back, because this kind of argument was completely meaningless. After that, she returned to her room alone and thought about what she should do. She could not return to London, and she was disliked by her mother-in-law. Was she really useless? At night, bored and restless, she walked into an old, broken-down storage shed. Inside, everything was messy and chaotic, but the equipment in front of her made her eyes light up. There was actually a dust-covered sewing machine here. Wasn't this exactly what she was best at? So after a round of repairs, the woman returned to her old craft. This could not only make life more interesting, but might also bring her some income. It was the best of both worlds. Even she herself smiled. Perhaps people who remain hopeful about life are always the most beautiful. After working all night, she sewed an apron for her mother-in-law. When her mother-in-law tied it around herself, she was obviously much happier. At the same time, Lily also made a beautiful nightgown for Sylvia. It was a piece of clothing that could show off her figure perfectly, but this made Sylvia feel humiliated. Sylvia angrily returned to her room. Because of this, the two sides had their first real conflict. Even the mother beside them let out a sigh, but Lily had no intention of giving up. She went straight to her sister-in-law's room, still wanting her to try on the lingerie. But who could understand the pain inside the girl's heart? It turned out Sylvia's leg defect made her deeply insecure about her body, but in reality, her sister-in-law also had an unbearable past. To prove it to Sylvia, Lily actually took off her coat. A huge scar appeared before the girl's eyes. This was the wound Lily had suffered while living in the war zone, and the reason she showed it to her sister-in-law was to tell her not to care too much about appearance. She wanted Sylvia to work hard to step out of her own shadow. Every girl has the right to pursue beauty. Seeing her sister-in-law hesitate a little, Lily tried again to hand the lingerie to her. Sadly, no matter how sincerely Lily appealed to her, the girl still seemed unable to escape her insecurity. Meanwhile, her mother-in-law stormed in angrily. She criticized Lily's behavior to her face. Her mother-in-law believed Lily should not fill Sylvia's head with those unrealistic ideas. She said Charlie might like Lily's clever city ways, but they were simple country people, so Lily should not bring that whole set of ideas here. This so-called simple way of thinking sounded rather forced. In truth, they still could not get past the barrier in their hearts. And just like that, plain days passed one after another. Lily gradually changed from the timid woman who was once afraid to collect eggs into someone who handled the work with ease. A full 3 years passed, and her husband still had not returned from the battlefield. But today, a rare visitor arrived. A luxury car slowly drove up. Could this poor, remote place really have such wealthy relatives? Just as Lily stood there in surprise, an elegant lady in fur opened the door and stepped out. Only then did Lily, stunned in place, react. It turned out to be her closest friend, Sophie. The two had not seen each other for a full year. Their uncontrollable excitement was written all over their faces, but their situations were now completely different. Both had left London full of hope and come to distant Canada to join their mothers-in-law. Now Sophie had become a genuine noble lady, while Lily looked as if she had turned into a country girl. Then the two happily hurried back into the house. Faced with the arrival of a guest from far away, the mother and daughter also began preparing lunch. Of course, after not seeing each other for so long, the two sisters naturally had many private things to say. It turned out Sophie's in-laws not only owned an estate, but also had a huge hotel in the city. She did not have to do anything every day. She even invited Lily's sister-in-law to come over and visit, but the girl was clearly not interested in a luxurious life. Instead, when she saw Sophie's outfit, she cared very much. This closed-off and conservative place shocked even Sophie. Then the two originally wanted to whisper privately, but when they saw the watchful eyes of Lily's mother-in-law, the sisters had no choice but to go to Lily's room. The moment she walked in, Sophie bluntly said this place was terrible. Back then, Charlie had bragged about vast prairie and a huge farm to win Lily over, but it had all been a lie. Sophie immediately began packing Lily's things, planning to take her best friend away, but Lily directly refused her. Everything she had encountered in life was the choice fate had given her, so she would wait for the day her husband returned. Soon, evening approached, and Sophie put on her coat to leave. The atmosphere at that moment was subtle. She barely had any conversation with the mother and daughter. The mother-in-law handled the food while staring straight at her. Sylvia, sitting on the stool, was the complete opposite. She kept her head down peeling potatoes and never looked directly at Sophie. Perhaps the difference in status was simply too great. It was as if they had never welcomed this guest at all. That night, Lily, feeling miserable, walked outside. Looking at this vast, desolate land, how could she not long for the bustling city? Perhaps this was just fate. Life still had to go on. Over the next few days, Lily began learning how to drive under her mother-in-law's guidance. Although many mishaps happened along the way, it actually brought her closer to her mother-in-law. There was even much more laughter than before. Only Sylvia remained cold. So Lily, now making progress in her lessons, went to the only shop in town to buy things. And the shop owner was Peggy, whom she had met once before. This woman was Charlie's ex-girlfriend. The last time they met, they had almost gotten into a fight. This time, Lily came as a customer, but there was still no smile on her face. Peggy's younger brother, however, was very friendly. He not only took the items to the car for her, but also specially gave Lily several tins of candy. The boy was humorous and charming as he talked, making the lonely woman feel a faint spark of affection. But do not forget, Sylvia was pursuing this boy. And just like that, as time slowly passed, the distance between Lily and her mother-in-law gradually eased. Every time Lily went to town, she dressed herself up carefully. It was as if she had finally found some pleasure in life. But her overly glamorous appearance always looked out of place among the country women. At the same time, it also made her mother-in-law worry. After all, with her husband away for years, some single man would naturally start thinking about her. And the truth was exactly that. Then she came to that same store from before. Perhaps wanting to ease her relationship with Peggy, she actually gave her a piece of lingerie, and it was something Lily had sewn herself by hand. At first, Peggy disliked this kind of thing, but Lily truly wanted to become friends with her. At the same time, she invited Peggy to come to her home for dinner that night. How could Peggy refuse such sincere kindness? Not only that, Lily also asked her to bring her family. That way, it would feel livelier. Such an open-hearted woman made Peggy feel somewhat guilty, and when Lily walked out of the store, she happened to see Joe moving goods. For some reason, the woman's eyes kept lingering on him. Maybe she saw a shadow of her husband in him, or maybe the boy before her really did fascinate her. In any case, Lily's heart began to ripple. Soon, night arrived. Knowing that the boy she liked was coming, Sylvia deliberately changed her usual conservative style. She put on a dress her sister-in-law had made by hand, but she was very nervous inside. Afraid the boy she liked would not like it, her sister-in-law eased Sylvia's tangled emotions by teaching her how to dance. After that, the other family arrived as promised. Dinner was also very generous. Everyone enjoyed it happily, and the atmosphere was extremely harmonious. But when it came time to dance, everything changed completely. At first, Sylvia danced with Joe. Perhaps because the girl's leg did not move smoothly, the two looked very unnatural. Everyone noticed something was off. But what Lily absolutely should not have done was take the initiative to dance with Joe. The sweet smiles on both of their faces made the people beside them deeply uncomfortable, especially Sylvia. Watching them happily put their arms around each other instantly made the insecure girl burn with jealousy, but she did not explode on the spot. Instead, after the dinner guests had left, she directly attacked her sister-in-law with vicious words. She called Lily shameless. She said Lily had first stolen Charlie from Peggy, and now wanted to steal Joe too. Lily explained that it had only been a dance, but Sylvia would not listen at all. The insecurity caused by her leg defect made her suffer deeply. It also made this sister-in-law from the big city feel helpless in her husband's family for the first time. So Lily took her child and left that very night. But in this remote countryside, where could she possibly find a place to stay? What no one expected was that Lily actually knocked on Joe's door. The boy was surprised by her arrival. In the middle of the night, what on earth had happened? In truth, Lily had nowhere left to go and hoped he could offer some help. And the scene of the two meeting was seen clearly by Joe's mother upstairs. Not only that, at this moment when Lily was lonely and helpless, Joe tried to take advantage of her. He actually leaned in and kissed the woman directly, and Lily did not immediately dodge. Perhaps she really needed a caring man to love her. At the same time, the mother by the window did not stop them either. She simply stared at their reckless behavior. Only when Joe's movements grew more intense, and the child in the car suddenly started crying, did Lily finally wake up from being lost. She stopped Joe. This was not what she truly wanted.
You still love Charlie?
God, I really loved him. And now I can't even remember his face. I can't remember what he looks like. I can't remember how he speaks. I can't remember anything about my goddamn husband.
She had waited 3 whole years for her husband without receiving a single letter. To this day, she still did not know whether he was alive or dead. Now, after suffering such grievances at her mother-in-law's house, how could Lily not feel lonely? But she still chose to take her child back home again the next day. The silent atmosphere was still suffocating, but this time, her mother-in-law changed her attitude. Because her daughter's words yesterday had truly hurt people, so the mother-in-law put away her old stubbornness and took the initiative to watch Lily's daughter. At the same time, Sylvia also made a gesture. She handed her sister-in-law a cup of hot tea. Although the girl was not good with words, this was still an apology expressed through action, and just like that, life returned to its usual rhythm. With her excellent sewing skills, Lily made custom dresses for the women nearby. She earned some money from it, which counted as contributing to the household. Not only that, Her relationship with Sylvia also eased. She even taught the disabled girl how to drive. It was exactly like when she herself first began learning to drive. Many funny things happened along the way, seeing them truly become close. Her mother-in-law felt deeply relieved inside. Life went on day after day, year after year. The ordinary years seemed to wear away the passion Lily once had. Instead, she gradually adapted to this environment. But today, her life was once again thrown into turmoil. Her daughter seemed panicked for some reason. She was mumbling something, and clearly looked very frightened. Then her daughter told her mother to hurry into the house. So Lily soothed her daughter's emotions while returning to the room to see what had happened. But what she never expected was that her husband, separated from her for so many years, had actually returned. The man had survived the battlefield. He had returned home safe and sound. This should have been a tremendous joy, but Charlie did not seem very happy. At the same time, his mother and Sylvia returned home a little later. The moment his mother saw her son appear, she could hardly believe her eyes. Perhaps time can wear away everything, but it cannot wear away family love carved into the bones. The feeling when Charlie embraced his family was clearly different. This made Lily, watching from the side, feel a little disappointed, but her husband had finally come back alive. She should also fulfill her duties as a wife. So that night, Lily changed early into a thin nightgown. She tried to feel the joy of their long-awaited reunion. She thought her husband would be full of life and desire, but when Charlie lay down in bed, the situation was completely different. A simple goodnight was all he gave the wife who had been lonely for years. Could something be wrong with Charlie's body? Or was there another hidden reason? At the very least, he should talk to his wife, but the man gave no response at all. Only when Lily suddenly woke in the middle of the night did she discover that her husband was not beside her. It turned out Charlie was sitting outside alone, reading gloomily. It was as if his body and mind had suffered a heavy blow. Then Lily wanted to call her husband back to the room to sleep, but Charlie's reply made him seem like a completely different person. He told Lily to cover herself properly, because his mother also lived in this house. The air was filled with a sense of distance. All the hardship Lily had endured while waiting seemed to turn into nothing, even in the days that followed. Whenever Lily tried to communicate with her husband, Charlie would not look her in the eye. He had become timid, afraid to mention anything that had happened on the battlefield. He only knew how to work blindly, sealing himself inside his own private world. Even toward his mother and sister, he acted the same way. So Lily began complaining to her mother-in-law, but the answer she received was to wait. Perhaps only time could erase the wounds the war had left in Charlie's heart. But how long could Lily wait? During this time, Lily wanted to call her best friend and pour out her grievances, but for some reason, Sophie could never be reached. It was as if she had vanished without a trace. So in order to help her husband step out of his pain, Lily came up with another idea. She invited nearby friends to the house, trying to make the atmosphere livelier. Of course, Peggy had once been Charlie's ex-girlfriend. Lily took the initiative to greet her, but what she got back was still a cold response. And Joe, who had nearly developed something with Lily, was there too. All of this seemed to be in the past, but it was brewing a major crisis. After dinner, Lily took the initiative to invite her husband to dance. Meanwhile, Sylvia and Joe were not idle either. They also danced together to the gentle music. But very quickly, the situation changed completely. Peggy still seemed to be carrying jealousy in her heart. She actually revealed that Lily and Joe had kissed that night. And this cruel, line-crossing secret did not hurt just one person. Joe quickly explained, saying that the incident had meant nothing, but Sylvia could not accept it at all. The scene instantly fell into chaos. As the friends gradually left, the old mother also returned to her room in anger, and Peggy had ruined the entire evening. This was destined to be an extraordinary night. Then, after calming down, Charlie opened his wife's door. Because of this incident, Lily seemed unable to continue living here anymore. She wanted to pack her things and return to London. After all, she had been saving money all this time. But at this moment, her husband expressed his apology. Perhaps when the two first met, they had both been too young, which had led to so many conflicts and differences now. So they gave each other another chance. They decided to let go of the unhappiness of the past and start over from now on. After all, they still loved each other deeply, but could these beautiful expectations really come true? A few days later, a luxury car drove onto the farm. Lily by the window immediately sensed who it was. Clearly, Sophie had come to visit her. Another full year had passed. Although the two had lost contact in between, their friendship had never changed. But Sophie was clearly not as happy as she had been on her last visit. At the same time, Charlie also walked over from the side. Sophie actually hugged Charlie and cried, "Lily, standing beside them, felt very strange and tried to ask what had happened. Even after the two walked into the house, Lily still looked confused. In fact, something really had happened to her best friend. Sophie was about to leave her wealthy life behind and return to London. The reason was that Sophie's husband had died in a concentration camp. He had not returned safely like Charlie. Charlie had not told his wife the news before. On one hand, it was because he grieved the death of his good brother. On the other, he did not want to reopen the old wounds of war. Sophie's visit this time was her final farewell to Lily, and both of their lives had undergone major changes. No one knew whether these two best friends would ever have the chance to meet again in this life. As time passed, life seemed to become much more peaceful. Sylvia and Joe also set aside the misunderstandings between them. They became inseparable every day. And today was a special day, because good news came over the radio. All fighting on the European continent had stopped. This also meant the war was completely over. The news was thrilling, especially for Charlie, who suffered from the trauma of war. He had waited far too long for this moment. All the emotions he had suppressed poured out at this instant. Not only that, in the days that followed, Charlie changed his old ways. He took the initiative to install a convenient toilet for the family. At the same time, a faint smile began to appear on his face. That night, the small town was bustling with excitement. It seemed everyone was celebrating the victory of the war. Meanwhile, Charlie deliberately put on his military uniform. He joined the people in feeling the joy brought by victory. Then the couple slowly walked into the crowd. When an old veteran wounded by an explosion on the battlefield saw Charlie also wearing combat uniform, he saluted him to show the spirit of a soldier, but Charlie only stared at him closely and did not return the salute. Only after the couple returned home did Charlie suddenly take a black notebook from his bag. Then he handed the notebook to his wife. He said this was the diary he had written during the war. Inside, it recorded in detail what had happened every day. At the same time, he admitted that he had never even been to Calgary.
I've never been a religious man, but now I pray for forgiveness. I'm so tired.
The next morning, Charlie's mother took a small object from the cupboard. Then she placed it directly into a metal box. Everything seemed very mysterious. Then she went out to the yard and buried the metal box in front of her husband's grave. It was as if she had made a complete farewell to yesterday. On the other side, Charlie finally stopped being cold and withdrawn. He and Lily began a new love story in a passionate embrace. At this point, the film comes to an end. This film is adapted from the novel of the same name by Angela Workman. It is a quiet film with deep emotional currents. On the surface, it tells the story of a cross-border marriage set against the backdrop of war. But in truth, it shows how war silently changes the fate of every ordinary person. Lily changes from a London girl full of fantasy into a foreign bride facing coldness, prejudice, and loneliness alone in a remote Canadian town. What she experiences is not just a clash between different places and cultures. It is also the difficult journey of a woman fighting for survival and dignity in a male-dominated environment. With restrained and delicate brushstrokes, the film depicts how war erodes families and individual minds. Charlie returns with the shadow of the battlefield. His mother has lived for years in loneliness and regret. Everyone carries wounds they cannot speak of. The distance and defensiveness between them are as hard as this cold land. But as time passes, small cracks slowly open in their hearts. New understanding and acceptance quietly begin to grow. This film makes us deeply feel that the trauma of war does not exist only in battlefield smoke. It also continues in the everyday lives of those who survived. It is a silent tug of war, and it is proof of humanity stubbornly fighting to survive among the ruins.